it's just interesting to start to track. It's probably one of the most validating experiences of their lives because they see what is happening and go, oh my gosh, I'm not going crazy. There is physically something happening in my body that is it's multi-systemic. It affects every system in the body. And that's what's happened to me. You can't argue with it. It's evident. Then you can correlate the two and see how those hormones are affecting your traits in real time. The problem is that the majority of prescribers don't understand progesterone and its multiple roles. They're very limited with the types of progesterone they can prescribe, and the way that progesterone is processed in the body has a big impact on how you experience it, and the doses are very low.
Welcome, love, to Wild Flow, the podcast for wild and wise women devoted to honoring your body's wisdom, reclaiming your cyclical power, and walking as a feminine leader in life, love, and through your soul work and purpose. I'm Charlotte Puanto, embodiment coach, ritual priestess, menstrual cycle educator, and feminine business mentor, here to guide soul-led women to step forward as their most magical, womb-awakened, authentic, and sovereign selves. On the podcast, we have rich and deep conversations with women I deeply admire who are leading the way in the reclamation of sacred feminine power. Ready for a new episode, my love? Let's flow. Welcome back to Wild Flow Podcast. I'm your host, Charlotte Puanto, and today we are exploring the deeply layered intersection of ADHD and perimenopause, two experiences that have long been misunderstood, especially when they show up in women. I'm joined again by the powerhouse that is Adele Wimsett. You might remember Adele from one of our most popular episodes back in 2022, when she broke down how ADHD shows up differently in women and how our hormones shape that experience. Today, she's back with groundbreaking insights from her new study on perimenopause, hormones, ADHD traits, and the overlooked role of progesterone. Adele is a women's health practitioner and cyclical living guide. Adele is passionate about educating women on how to harness the power of their cyclical nature. From menarche to menopause, Adele bridges the woo and the science, supporting women to balance their hormones naturally, and is passionate about speaking on all things menstrual cycle education. Adele's specialism within the women's health arena is offering support to ADHD women to understand how their hormones affect their traits. This episode is a deep dive, but also it's incredibly practical. We unpack how estrogen and progesterone affect ADHD symptoms, why many women feel like they're losing themselves in their 40s, and what you can actually do about it, from cycle tracking to nervous system support to informed conversations about hormone therapy. If you've ever felt overwhelmed, emotionally raw, or like your coping tools just stop working seemingly overnight, this conversation will land deeply. Let's get into it. Hi, Adele, and welcome back to Wild Flow Podcast. I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you for joining us. How are you going today?
I'm so good. I'm so excited to be here again with you, Charlotte. Looking forward to getting stuck into this.
Yeah, I was just looking at your last episode, which was, we recorded it in October 2022, and I just can't believe that it's been that long. I can't believe I've been podcasting that long. I've just realized I've just hit 100 episodes, and
Wow.
I'm just so excited to have you back for this conversation because so much will have changed in this time, and I've learned so much, and I learned so much from you in that first episode too. And before we go any further, I just really want to highlight this episode for anyone who's here and not listened to it, that back in, say, October 2022, we were talking about ADHD. And this was really the first time I got to really understand and appreciate actually what ADHD is and our sort of current understanding of it as well, a more modern understanding of it, but particularly how it shows up in girls, how girls are getting lost in these conversations, and the experience with puberty, and then with women, how the hormones of the menstrual cycle are interacting with ADHD. And we were talking about trying to understand and recognize ourselves in this ADHD profile for females, how to get help when medical practitioners aren't understanding those gender differences. And yeah, it was just like it's like one of our most popular episodes. So I know how powerful it's been. So I'm really thrilled to have you back today and catch up with, what's new since then, but particularly the work you're doing as your work's evolved and you're really focusing on this perimenopause space with ADHD as well. So Adele, like just yeah, thrilled to have you here. Let's
Thank you for having me.
let's kick off with a cycle check-in. I'd love to hear just where you're at today and how you're feeling, and then I'll share
This is
too.
like this is like divine timing for me to do a podcast. I'm day 9, although I'm perimenopausal, so who really knows what that even means these days, but actually, on day 9, we're good. The sun is shining. I'm in a good place. I'm really, yeah, just feeling really enthused to be here.
Brilliant. I love that. And it's my cycle day 3. And yesterday would have been like the worst day ever for us to do the podcast. I was like, oh my God, just so exhausted and just needed to go and lie down and nap, and my brain wasn't working. But today I feel like a bit of a rebirth, still a bit tender and a bit like, ooh, I've had a bit of a wobbly day in my heart, but I just feel really like, yeah, that kind of energy is really rising, and I'm just so happy to be here with you, my love. So yeah, it's equinox today too. Happy
I
equinox.
know. And to you, and to you.
Yeah.
I've got up. I woke up at 10 to 5 this morning. I was like, oh, hi. And I was ready to go. I went out and I saw the moon on one side. I went out for a walk at about 5:30. The moon was on one side and the sky was this bright, fiery pink on the other. And I was like, oh, it's just beautiful. And we've got clear blue sky, which never happens in England. So I'm embracing that.
Oh, that's lush. We've had similar actually. It's been really weirdly warm for the last few days. We had a really cool drop. I was like, oh yeah, autumn's here. And then it's gone hot again. But today was just beautiful. And we've got like, yeah, I was just really appreciating like the sun setting a little bit earlier. But I was like, oh, this is the last time it will be lighter more than darker for the next 6 months as we're slipping into autumn here. But you've got that like beautiful bubbly spring energy coming. So part of me feels a little bit jealous because I just love spring. I just love that like potential and possibility, but embracing autumn here too. So happy equinox, everybody. All right, Adele, let's go, babes. I'm so yeah, interested to hear first of all what you would like to share with us about what's happened in terms of our understanding of ADHD, particularly in women in the last couple of years or so, if there's anything that's really shifted and changed, if there's any sort of new insights to just add on to what we knew in 2022 before we really go into this conversation with perimenopause. So just a bit more broadly.
Yeah. So what I would say is it is still vastly under researched. Okay. So like anything that I'm sharing here within this context is we just need a ton more information. That's just the reality. Okay. So practitioners like myself, we're kind of the way that I'm working is to be looking at, well, what do we know about the hormones? What do we know about the relationship with neurotransmitters? What do we know about ADHD in women? What do we know about the different life phases? And what can we hypothesize from that? That's kind of the space. So I would say the biggest shift has been starting to acknowledge that we are different, which I know sounds ridiculous, but that is what's happening. And I would say in 2023 and 2024, we had several pieces of research come out, which were really important, which I've actually referenced in the literature review of the study, which we'll talk about in a bit. But one of them has evidence, which women already knew, that medication effectiveness for the women who choose medication is affected by the hormonal fluctuations in the cycle. So like most medication, it's tested on lab rats that tend to be male and male physiologies or women who have had their cycle shut down with a pill. So we don't get this data about the influence the hormones have. And we know these are the most powerful biochemicals in the body, right? So it's just absurd that we're not taking that into consideration. But so what we're seeing is where estrogen rises in the cycle, it sensitizes medication. And if you're ovulating in that second half of the cycle and progesterone is rising there, it can make you feel like your meds aren't working anymore. So what I'm seeing happen is prescribers kind of going, okay, we acknowledge this is happening now. We've got a piece of research that kind of supports that, but we don't really know what to do about it. So they'll start kind of like chucking different meds, different doses, different things in, trying to negate that. And I'm sure this would be probably in alignment with you, Charlotte, in that actually I think there's more that we could be doing there around just acknowledging that we feel different in that phase and how does life need to shift for us rather than maybe just topping up meds. But that's such a personal experience. So that's where we are in terms of medication. There was one piece of research that came out in February 2024, which has been the first of its kind to show these distinct phases of the cycle and where traits can show up. And it's great. It's a really great piece of research because they've created a model or a theory around hormones and what they're doing for us. And what I would say is it's very focused on estrogen. And I've spoken to one of the researchers who's wonderful, and they've acknowledged that it was very estrogen focused, which is a theme across all of women's health. Everyone is obsessed with estrogen, which we can talk about. And my dear friend, progesterone really gets put on the back burner. But this piece of research showed that where the estrogen rises and then drops after ovulation, we saw an increase in hyperactive traits. So things like positive aggression, more risk-taking behavior, maybe more likely to use substances like alcohol in that time. And then in the second rise of estrogen that we get after around as that progesterone peaks and estrogen does a little peak again in that luteal phase. Once that withdraws, we saw a flare up of inattentive traits. So much more likely to forget things, to kind of phase out, that kind of thing. So that was really interesting to me to see this impact on estrogen. I just hope it doesn't take us too much down the estrogen pathway, because I've started to hear little rumblings around, oh, we could start to prescribe some estrogen and then that will kind of make everything okay. I don't think that's happening in practice, but I'm hearing these conversations and I would be very cautious about that kind of approach, which we can talk about. So I would say the biggest shifts are we are recognizing that hormones have an impact because now the research is starting to happen a little bit. And we're recognizing the impact and acknowledging it on medication. And we are moving towards deeper understanding of the role the hormones play at different phases of the cycle.
Thanks so much for explaining that. That's really interesting to see like where the conversations are going and when the knowledge is being developed and we're getting more of this awareness, but still such a long way to go. And then reaching for these like sort of quick fix band-aid options without really, we're not at the point yet where we really understand what's going on. And you talked about your best friend, progesterone. I'd love to hear, more about that and like actually what women should start to be aware of or even potentially track as they're going through their cycle, particularly if if they do have ADHD, to just get more of a sense. So when they go to like, a medical practitioner or a healthcare provider, they are kind of able to tap into a bit more like what their experience is. Like, how do you suggest women do that?
Yeah, so this is actually the model we used in the study, which we'll talk about, but this is what I use in my clinic and it works really well. So I find cycle tracking apps for ADHD women don't tend to be that helpful because we either forget they exist because we can't see them, or actually they're not that visual in being able to kind of really connect what's happening. So if someone had the resources available, I would highly recommend a hormone testing device at home called a mirror. I use Mirror. There are other ones. This is just one that I find really simple. So you get the exact levels of estrogen and progesterone throughout the month, and we can see that it gets tracked on an app. And then I suggest a piece of paper set out in a grid. You can download one off my website, and you might want to put one for your inattentive traits and one for your hyperactive traits if you have both, and just track like you would normally. Put whatever it is, your traits or your symptoms or whatever you want to track, and just print it off. Have it by the side of your bed with a pen that you do not use for anything else. Because if you get into bed and that pen's not there, you will not do it because we're already in bed. We're not going to get up again. So put a cross in the box at the end of the day where that was an issue, right? So
I'm
we
just
have
laughing
that
because
there.
that's me. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all of us. Actually, it's like, and then we say, I'll remember tomorrow. We won't remember.
No, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry. Sidetracked.
so true, right?
Relatable. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the women in my community. There is no point me giving you a way to do it that it just isn't going to work for us. So write it in a box and just have that. So even if you don't get a hormone testing device, you start to see your pattern. Okay. And what we tend to find, but this isn't every woman's experience, we tend to find that when you're in that follicular ovulation type phase, that our hyperactive traits come up, but we're much more that estrogen has risen, it's sensitized the dopamine and serotonin. We're like on it. All our strategies are working. Then we go into the second phase, and it's much more likely to be a raise in our inattentive traits, particularly in that late luteal. So it's just interesting to start to track that visually. So even if you can't hormone test, what I find though for women who hormone test, it's probably one of the most validating experiences of their lives because they see what is happening and go, oh my gosh, I'm not going crazy. There is physically something happening in my body that is it's multi-systemic. It affects every system in the body. And that's what's happened to me. And also, it lets us see that estrogen to progesterone ratio, which is super important for us, which again, we can talk about. So, in terms of tracking, you can download a free tracker from my website or create your own, get crossing and just get this visual because you can use that to take to appointments with doctors or therapists or whatever it is, the support you're accessing. And you can't argue with it. It's evidence, it's there of what's happening. So, it will validate your experience. And then if you can test the hormones on top of that, I can give you a discount code if that's something people want. You just pee on a stick in the morning, stick it in the device, and it tracks it on your app. It's super simple. And you can see, then you can correlate the two and see how those hormones are affecting your traits in real time. So does that help on the tracking?
Yeah, amazing. And I think that's really helpful for just people listening to get that sense of like what we can practically do about it
Yeah.
and have that information like as we deepen into this conversation as well. So that you're starting to think about like what you're tracking and how you're tracking and like what it means as well. And I think that piece around like actual hard evidence from the mirror device, like I'm super interested in that because I just feel like we do that, don't we? Constantly like second guess ourselves. It's like, oh, but am I though? Like, or how much? Or like, oh, like it's kind of subjective. And so we can, I think, ticking, as you said, like marking these traits against where you're at in your cycle, I think is super important. And then building up that pattern cycle to cycle, you'll obviously be able to see the patterns emerging. And then I just love this. The like data tech is so amazing these days that we don't have to do lab testing. We've got it like at home, pee on a stick in the morning, instant feedback. Brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
and blood tests are not helpful when we're looking at estrogen and progesterone, in my opinion. They're just not because your hormones pulse. So whatever that blood test said at that second is very accurate, but 5 minutes later, it's going to give you a different picture. So it's not helpful. And yet it seems to be used as this absolute definitive decider of whether there's an issue going on for a woman, which is just absurd. We need to see what's happening through the cycle. And for me, particularly with neurodivergent women, I want to see what's happening in that luteal phase because we know we're many more times likely to have PMDD alongside with our ADHD. And quite often women have been gaslit and just told, oh, it's just PMT, everyone has it, kind of get on with it. And actually, we're much more likely to have a more challenging perimenopause, much more likely to have postnatal depression. There's these risk factors here that we know. And if we can really see what's happening with our hormones, it just helps us, I think, to have a bit of self-compassion and kindness because the impact on our neurotransmitters is huge.
Mm. Yeah, I'm all for that. That's brilliant. So, Adele, let's now go into then more about the study that you've been doing. Tell us about like what you have looked at and why you chose to look at that. I'd love to know, like, this is obviously a need that you've had in your clinic and something you've really identified, but love to hear a bit of a context about it and then tell us about what you thought you were going to find and if you found that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd also love us to come back and talk about progesterone as well, because I think that's a really, really important topic for our community. So, in terms of the study, I am one of these people who doesn't like to just moan about things and not do anything about it. Okay. I think that is one of the amazing things about women in our world. We do not accept no as an answer. There's always a way. So I was getting very frustrated at the lack of information that I needed about the women that come to my clinic. And I was seeing patterns So I was very privileged to work in partnership with Mira to take it. It was a small cohort of women through 3 cycles of testing their hormones. They were all perimenopausal because that's kind of my thing. I support all women, but I think probably because I'm in it myself, I'm very interested in this kind of area of work because it's a very peak time for ADHD women to get diagnosed. And so I wanted to do a piece of work to say, well, why? What is coming off? So I was expecting to see a bit of a pattern come through, like to mirror that the pieces of research already been done. So the pattern that I had explained of this more hyperactive element in the first phase and this inattentive in the second, but that's not what came through. And on reflection, when I was looking at the findings and analysing them, I was like, well, of course it isn't. These women are perimenopausal. They're not regularly ovulating every single month. And even if they are ovulating, most of them had lazy corpus luteum. So they weren't producing a lot of progesterone, right? So why would they be having these distinct patterns? What actually distinct fluctuations? What I saw was a pattern of estrogen dominance. Okay. And what I mean by that is they didn't necessarily have high levels of estrogen, but they had insufficient progesterone to manage the feelings and reactions to their estrogen. And that was fascinating to me because it was one of those, well, of course, perimenopause, particularly in the first phase, as that ovulation is slowing down, is a natural time of estrogen dominance, but due to progesterone deficiency. And this is where it started to get really interesting for me. Was I am a massive fan of progesterone, as you know, because she gets put in the corner as an afterthought that all she does is look after the uterus, which is important, but she does so many more things than that. And for me, the most magical thing about her is the way she's a mood stabilizer. She stabilizes our mood. She regulates our nervous system. So if we take that knowledge and we look at what's happening in phase 1 of perimenopause, where these women were, of course, the lid's going to come off around diagnosis, right? Our traits are going to go through the roof because estrogen, I call the party girl, she's having a party by herself without sufficient progesterone to come in and go, calm down, it's time to go to sleep now, right? So she's partying. So no wonder the lid comes off, right? We're like, we haven't got this beautiful progesterone to act like Valium on our nervous system. So this to me was like, of course, yet no one's talking about progesterone. And I expect at this point, you're going to have people listening to this who are like, I hate progesterone. I'm sensitive to progesterone. I'm intolerant to progesterone. And that is a very valid experience. And I would never gaslight a woman in that experience. What I would do is offer an invitation of curiosity, because I have had the privilege of working with and interviewing the international leads on progesterone. And this is what has just blown my mind with progesterone.
Energy is everything, and your energy speaks volumes. Did you know that we all hold different frequencies, styles, strengths, and growth areas as leaders? When you're done with masculine, corporate, or patriarchal leadership, you might not even see yourself as a leader, but I know that you are, because you're here listening to this. It's time to shake off all the ways you hold yourself back and step into what is possible for you when you awaken and embody your feminine leadership to show up authentically and lead with soul as you share your magic and medicine more fully in the world. Sometimes we just need a magic mirror to help us see ourselves more fully so we can appreciate our own strengths and skills and learn to really use them for good. Take my Sacred Feminine Leadership Archetype quiz now to learn how to tap into your authentic energy, so when you show up, it feels easy, natural, and inspiring. Understand how to best attract your soul sister squad, how to tap into your natural wisdom, how to use your innate strengths, and how to work with your shadows. We need you in your full expression, leading from your feminine energy, so together we can create ripples of change around the world. Take my juicy quiz now to get your own keepsake guide at charlottepointo.com/quiz.
Firstly, when we're talking about progesterone, let's be very clear whether we're talking about a synthetic progestin, like in the pill or in patches or in the Mirena coil or the depot injection or whatever the thing. They're all synthetic. They're not body identical progesterone. And where these came from was in the 60s, pharmaceutical companies realized how incredible progesterone was at that point, particularly looking at managing ovulation. But you can't patent a natural molecule, right? So it was manipulated in a lab, despite the risks, despite the side effects, to make a small number of people a gazillion trillion dollars, right? And continues to do so now. Now, I'm not anti-contraception. It has been incredible for women and has had so many positives for us, right? I'm not taken away from that. My issue with it is the lack of informed consent about, do you really understand what you're doing with it? And also that prescribers will call it progesterone, and that's factually incorrect, okay? So we know, although research is very limited because it's pharmaceutical companies that tend to fund research, that progestins, the synthetic progestins that we all think is progesterone, can have a significant impact on mood, okay, and mental health. So I have women who've had the Mirena coil put in my clinic, and days later they've got suicidal ideation and they're on their knees. You know, it's really powerful and strong, the impact. And I see anecdotally, this is just my clinical experience, that ADHD women are much more likely to have an adverse reaction to it. And they may not even make the link. Okay. So I'm saying all of this because when I talk about progesterone, people go, I can't. And actually, well, question one, are you talking about a synthetic progestin or progesterone? Because they're very different. So that would be the first layer of confusion that we, on an international level, need to stop calling synthetic progestins progesterones. And then the next level, which is where I've been so grateful to access the work of Dr. Katarina Dalton, Carol Peterson, who's like an international lead on compound pharmacy, Dr. Phyllis Bronson, who has done so much work on body identical hormones and mental health. She's incredible. She's written a book. And actually, the problem is the dose of progesterone that we prescribe women. So, because estrogen has had all the spotlight when we're looking at something like HRT, progesterone, we just kind of go, oh, we'll stick a bit in to protect the womb. But this is actually, these low doses are what is causing the problem. So, I'm very privileged to work with an incredible specialist GP in my menopause clinic. And we work with women on tailored protocols of much higher doses if they need it. And the results are incredible. The problem is that the majority of prescribers don't understand progesterone and its multiple roles. They're very limited with the types of progesterone they can prescribe. And the way that progesterone is processed in the body has a big impact on how you experience it. And the doses are very low. So I just wanted to put that context in for anyone who's like, oh gosh, progesterone, no. Get curious. I've got free webinars on my website that you can download. I'm always open to this conversation because I think once we get progesterone right in women, everything changes. Everything. I can't tell you the difference it's made in my life, the difference it's made in women's lives that I work with in clinic. So it's definitely something to explore. So this came through in the research, right? So it is all still feeling on track because there's so much I want to share.
Yeah, go for it. I'm loving this.
Okay. So as we're in perimenopause, we know that lovely mood stabilizing nervous system support of the progesterone is shipping out, right? So in our late 30s, and we know we're starting perimenopause earlier, which I believe is due to our adrenal function, we are seeing this progesterone deficiency. And in this phase, we might start feeling a bit more overwhelmed. We have this like inner scratchiness. Our sleep isn't as good as it used to be. You know, we might start worrying about things and think, but I'm not a worrier. Where's this coming from? This is progesterone deficiency. Okay. And I talk about hormone deficiency like a slow erosion of your soul. You don't wake up one morning and it's all just gone unless you've had surgical menopause, right? It slowly happens. And women are like rivers. We find something hard and we just adapt and like meander around it. Okay. And we kind of push through and we power through. And actually, if we could start supporting women to optimize their own progesterone production and maybe replenish it if that's something they wanted to do, we could help to support women in that phase. So this started to make total sense to me when I was seeing estrogen patterns on the mirror data that we were testing. The estrogen was being very normal and doing its thing, but there wasn't sufficient progesterone to keep it in track. So no wonder the lid comes off for perimenopausal ADHD women, because we don't have the protective benefits of the mood stabilization of the progesterone. So did that all make sense?
Makes sense to me. I love that. And I think, like if I'm like so interested in this because I'm turning 40 this year. And I think that's something like the way you just said there about, about being rivers and how we just adapt to, all the things. And it's like this slow erosion of the soul, which like makes me kind of laugh. But also I'm a bit like, wow, yeah, I can really see how we can get to that point. And I'm just curious, just for one, is there a kind of age that you start seeing symptoms be really clear when women get to that point when they're like, this is undeniable now? And so is there a kind of, you've obviously said we're starting perimenopause earlier, and I'm like shocked to hear that, but also not shocked to hear that. Is there a kind of age that you think women might start to sort of subtly see some of these differences, and
Yeah.
like we can start really monitoring it from and be proactive on the front foot, just as like a framework, I guess, for listeners?
I would say, in answer to your question about age, I would say I think women at about 40 start going, is this, am I just stressed? Or is it this? Or is it, they start knowing something is feeling different. But because we still kind of think perimenopause or menopause is like something that happens down that road, right? We're talking from 35 onwards, we're having more anovulatory cycles. We're starting to become progesterone deficient. I think it starts to show up in women 40, 41, 42. It's like, and by 44, they're like, right, I need to sort this out. Like something is going on here. That tends to be the pattern. But you usually spend ages going, is it this? Is it that? You don't know. And you might make a shift. You might try a supplement. By the way, there's no supplement that's going to fix your perimenopause. And perimenopause is not something to be fixed. Okay. Let's be clear on that. It's not about fixing it. So that, but I would say that's the age range that I see clinically. And I think we have to be really clear here. Perimenopause is not an ovarian issue. The ovaries are doing exactly what they're meant to do. They're meant to do this. We shouldn't be messing around with that. This is an adrenal issue, okay? Because the adrenals, once those ovaries slow down their estrogen and progesterone production, they should be knocking on the door of the adrenals saying, come on, you need to take over now and produce enough to make this woman feel well for the rest of her life. It will never be in the levels the ovaries produce, but that's what the adrenals should do. Now, I challenge you to find a woman in our generation who's sauntering into menopause with really nourished, lovely adrenals. That's
Yeah.
not what's happening, right? Just by nature of the world we live in, you might not have an externally stressful life, but just the fact I will get off this podcast and probably have a number of messages that people expect me to answer immediately. 100 years ago, that would not have been my granny's experience, right? Her house phone might have rung once. Our nervous systems are not wired to exist in the mania that we exist. Our body hasn't evolved for whatever this is, right? So therefore we have this mismatch with what the body wants to do and is designed to do, and then the environment within which it has to exist. And the way this is showing up for women is crash landing into perimenopause, because those adrenals are barely staying on top of their cortisol production. And cortisol is the queen bee. So the body will prioritize production of cortisol over other hormones. And if you're stressed or that's starting to get low, your body, through a complex process, will convert steal progesterone, basically. It's much more complex than that, but you can become progesterone deficient when you are stressed, right? So we add to this problem. So for women who are like younger and listening to this, love on your adrenals. Nervous system regulation, all the beautiful somatic work that so many people are talking about now. This is the best prevention you can do, and so much more worthy than tons of supplements or anything we just want to like chuck at the wall and hope something sticks. Like, love your adrenals, regulate your blood sugar, keep inflammation low.
Brilliant. That's so helpful. And I so relate to that. Just this like questioning of like, oh, I'm just like, am I just more stressed? Have I just suddenly like, yeah, like why is my feeling this sort of tetchiness and the sleep subtly changing? And it's like, I'm fine. I can keep going. I can keep, living this way for like quite a long time. Like it's not, the house isn't on fire, but so subtly sensing from being really very attuned with my body and cycle and how I feel, I can just start to feel like the subtlest something very subtly just happening. So I love that piece of advice and think
I
that
think
like can just change the trajectory of all of this for us. Like you say, we can't fix it. We can't change the world that we live in, but we can like listen in and do what we can, like you say, with those tools and tips that you've just suggested.
I think don't wait until you're on your knees, right? I see this so much in clinic. Exactly what you've said, Charlotte. It's women keep going, yeah, but I'm fine. It's fine. And it's like, hang on, what are we waiting for here? Because again, just talk about progesterone, because obviously that's my hyper focus and obsession, is it will reduce your capacity and your bandwidth, right? So you might find yourself going, why am I not getting through this like I used to? Or why is like three things have happened today and I feel like I'm now on the edge, whereas these things just wouldn't have bothered me before. This is progesterone. Okay.
Mm.
And then what happens is we keep going, it's fine. Like I'm fine. I'm functioning. I'm fine. But what are we waiting for? Don't wait till you're in the trenches and then we've got to pull you out of the trenches, because that's a lot harder than when we're going, right, I'm
Exactly.
shifted, what's happening, what do I need? I'm shifting, I'm happening, what do I need?
Mm. Yeah, and we go back to the mirror device and those kind of tools where it's like actually you can get that hard data that's like, yeah, your progesterone is actually changing. You're not imagining this. Like, let's just skip those years of like gaslighting ourselves. Like I'm all for that. Like that to me is just like what a beautiful relief to have that.
Yeah.
Something else I really want to highlight that was highlighted back to me by my friend Sophie. She was on the podcast the other week and she was talking about progesterone. And I think I said bioidentical progesterone. And she said, no, body identical progesterone. And then I've heard you say body identical as well. And I just would love, is this something that you're like happy to explain just for people who are listening who are like, you're going to talk about progesterone and then you might be offered something by a medical practitioner. Again, like you said, different types of progesterones. Is there a difference that we should be aware of?
All the same thing. Okay. So, like, basically, the progesterone, whether it's an over the counter cream, whether it's bioidentical or body identical, it's all exactly the same progesterone molecule. It comes from yams, it comes from soybeans, it's natural, it's the same as our body produces. Okay. But this is where it starts to get a little bit confusing. Okay. So, over the counter creams are very low doses of progesterone that you can get to help. There is one I know that is available in Australia, which is called ONAS, but because of the popularity with them at the minute, they can be a bit tricky to get a hold of. But you can buy over-the-counter creams that you can use. Okay. Now, bioidentical is like the umbrella term that refers to this molecule. Okay. Well, now, body identical is where it tends to be used interchangeably. One refers to the way that to all progesterone, and the bio is specifically around compounded pharmacists. Okay. Now, I'm a big fan of compounded pharmacists, but they aren't usually supported by the big organizations, because what happens is when you get a tailor-made, specific, bespoke HRT for you, it uses the same more hormones that get used in bog standard HRT, right? It's exactly the same. They're subject to the same quality controls. It's very, very restrictive. And so it should be, very careful, because we're putting this in our bodies. What then happens after these quality things is that lot goes over there to be mass produced and put out. But that product is then subject to other controls because there's so much of it. When it goes to a compounded pharmacist where it is specifically turned into something for you, you can't then do that bottle to do the same quality control checks that all the mass produced stuff gets, right? It's just not feasible. But it has been subjected to quality control before it goes into that bottle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah. So the bio usually gets referred to as the compounded specific, where you'd work with a private compounded pharmacist, and the body identical is kind of, yeah, it's for the regulated, like in the UK, the NHS kind of stuff. So, but
Interesting.
the bottom line is
Yeah.
they're all the same thing. They're all the
Yeah.
same molecule. That's it. It just
Okay.
depends how you choose to get it.
Interesting. That's really good to know. Thank you. Yeah, I think the more that we can be like informed and like understand, like you say, what we're putting into our bodies and what these different terminologies are, and then we can just be more empowered and more mindful. So that's so helpful. And something I want to touch on that I read up in your study, and that is an issue for
Yeah.
ADHD women, and something that like I'm interested in because I know how I have issues with this too. But talk to us about histamine. I'd love to hear, like, would you introduce to everyone like what histamine is if they're not aware of it, and just how it's showing up?
So this was the second layer to the study that I had no idea would form part of any hypothesis or outcome, because I thought we were really going to be looking at these traits. And then, of course, we went down the whole progesterone route. And then there was this next layer that, as I was doing the analysis and gathering the qualitative data in terms of interviewing the women, it started to occur to me that there were themes around histamine. Again, something that is massively under-researched in neurodivergent women, but is something that is often spoken about in the community. So you'll see like influencers or clinics or whatever will be aware, or groups are aware of this histamine issue. Now, histamine is something that we all naturally produce, and we tend to think of it linked through to allergies, like maybe hay fever season or having hives or rhinitis or something like that, where we see this very obvious link with histamine. But histamine makes you feel like crap. It's inflammation. It's often linked with things like PMDD, endometriosis, estrogen dominant type patterns. And the reason for this is that estrogen feeds histamine and histamine feeds estrogen. Okay, now histamine is something that is produced from something called mast cells, and they're part of the immune system. So it creates an inflammatory response. It's like the body receives a message of some sort that causes these cells to pump out histamine. Okay, now like I've said, when estrogen is higher, it will feed this histamine pattern. So estrogen dominance can cause symptoms around histamine: mood, lack of sleep, anxiety, PMDD. These are all linked to histamine, and yet you would never, I don't think you'd go to a doctor and that link would be made. Okay, it's something that we can't really test for. It's much more symptoms based. And all of the women in the study had symptoms, and I can't diagnose. That wasn't my role. It was about looking at patterns. All of them had symptoms that could sit very clearly within histamine intolerance. So to me, I was like, right, we've got this estrogen dominant pattern, usually due to low progesterone. Progesterone is an antihistamine, whereas estrogen produces more. So we've not only not got this lack of progesterone, we've also got this histamine and estrogen pattern, which will significantly affect traits and mood, right? So we then see this flare up again. So there is this link, this hormonal link, where the estrogen is stimulating the mast cells. It reduces the activity of an enzyme in the gut called the DAO enzyme that helps get rid of the histamine, which causes these spikes and makes us feel horrible. It's actually a reason I can't touch estrogen HRT. If I take estrogen HRT, I feel horrible on it. Absolutely horrible. And I want to kind of like come out of my own skin in it. Not because it's like itching, I'll get the odd hive, but I feel just inflamed. I feel irritable, grumpy. And it's not the estrogen, it's what my body does with it in terms of histamine. And so that, I think, is another massive area that we need more research for women like us.
Mm.
Does that help with explaining the histamine?
Yeah, totally. I think like, I think women who are, looking into their health and looking at their hormone health are going to probably have heard of histamine before, but like you say, absolutely not aware of its role in with estrogen, and going into perimenopause, and then how this really can exacerbate ADHD traits as well. Like it's like it's like a bit of a shitstorm, isn't it? So
I called it the perfect storm, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. So talk us through then, give us some hope. Like you said, like this is for the earlier sort of phases of perimenopause. Like what's the trajectory that you're aware of, like with the hormones and how they shift and drop through
Yeah.
perimenopause, and then the symptoms, particularly ADHD. Like when we get to the end of our cycling years and we reach menopause, like is that ADHD? Like how's ADHD show up then? Like what's that path?
Oh,
Do you
this
know?
do you know what the honest answer is? We don't know, right? We don't, from a research perspective, we haven't researched women, let alone cohorts of women at different ages in terms of that. So that's the honest answer, is we don't have the data to support that. What I hear from women in the community who are post-menopause and kind of like through the other side of this estrogen dominant pattern is everything flatlines, right? It's like, oh, because lots of women, as I've said, have had PMDD or a difficult time. So there's been this ebb and flow that they've never been able to have any real support for, where we clear the histamine, we regulate we replenish the progesterone or optimize the progesterone. We make sure that those methylation pathways through the liver, because that's another element to it, are getting rid of estrogen properly. All these things massively help that fluctuation, right? But no one's taught us that. No one's helped us with that. So by the time these women who are now talking about ADHD for the first time in their lives, they're like, oh, thank goodness, it kind of flatlines. But I would say that is going to be very individual, because if you have got, for example, a histamine issue or these other underlying things, it may not. If you're trying to work with HRT, for example, and you're feeding a histamine issue, you're not going to feel great and you'll think it's the HRT. So I would say it's very individual and we don't have the data to support it. But what I do hear from women who've had that real ebb and flow, they're like, oh, thank God it's gone.
Mm.
That's the picture we've got at the moment.
Yeah.
And it will obviously depend how good your adrenals were, right? How not good, but how optimal they were when you went into that phase.
So how optimal they are at the start of perimenopause, because that's going to
Yeah.
then carry you through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But
Yeah.
I don't want you to feel like, oh my God, I'm knee deep in perimenopause and my adrenals are like shot to bits. There's no hope. There is so much. Honestly, I mean, if you're open to progesterone, I think that could be a game changer. Really working on your nervous system, regulating your blood sugar, exploring histamine. How is your gut eliminating the hormones? How is your liver methylating them? There's so much we can do to ease the pressure on the body and optimize that hormone function. We always get women feeling better in one way, shape, or form. It might take a little while, but we do it.
Yeah. There is hope, there is tools,
Yeah,
there is knowledge.
absolutely.
Yeah. Like
Mm.
and that's what's so exciting. And I feel so grateful to you and to all of the work that's now being done in this space. It's like there's been a big blow up in conversations about perimenopause and menopause. And like I feel so grateful because I like this is ahead of me. And it's like, wow, like how beautiful to be able to go into this with a bit more knowledge and understanding. And, I just think that this is, they say like there's going to be something, I can't remember what it is, but like the number of women moving through menopause and into postmenopause, like that demographic is just growing. We've got so much collective power between us. So it's just so like beautiful to witness how much is now being done in this space. And yet, even though we've got a long way to go, like we're starting off. And so thank you for this beautiful piece of work. And I'm so happy that we've got this knowledge and you and all the amazing things you're doing.
Oh, my pleasure. I mean, it's my hyper focus, so I could talk to you about it all day, Charlotte. And I love speaking to women, who connect to me through Instagram and the messages that we get. Sometimes it's just really simple little tweaks. It's not always easy because change, consistency is not an ADHD woman's friend, usually, but we find strategies that work to make it work for us. And I just think, we do this so much for our work for our daughters, right? That's such the passion drive, and their experience will be different to ours, thank goodness. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah. Yeah. And just so amazing to have this conversation, particularly tying in these two like completely under misunderstood realms, really, ADHD and perimenopause, like coming together in this beautiful conjunction. And I just think this is going to give so many women so much help and hope and
So
tools. Yeah. So Adele, where can people connect with you? Tell us about what you're offering as well. I know that you're obviously based in the UK, but tell us what kind of support you've got over there, and I'll link to this research as well so people can have a read of that. But
well, it's been really beautiful. In the last year, I would say probably 25% of my clients now in clinic are Australian. So I've loved my Oz women. It's just brilliant to be able to have that reach because my clinic's online. So I do have an in-person clinic that I run in the UK with a specialist GP, but I'm very accessible. You know, women everywhere needs help, and the story is the same whatever country I'm supporting a woman in. You know, it's the same problems that we're all facing. So I'm not very good with tech, but I can master just about hanging out on Instagram. I sometimes miss messages or comments. So if I do, I'm not ignoring you. If you're a woman with rejection sensitivity dysphoria, please don't think I'm ignoring you intentionally, and you can stalk me a little bit. But I love connecting with women, and I've got loads of resources on my website that are free or either very affordable. I would definitely check out some of the webinars on there because, yeah, the more information we've got, the more empowered we can be in the choices we make.
are you still running your community as well for ADHD women?
So we have a WhatsApp support group called ADHD Divas, which is just a really great community of women affected in some way by ADHD. So, you know, women are very welcome to reach out if they want to join that. Sometimes it's inappropriate memes, other times we're talking about washing machines, other times we're talking about medication and tools and strategies and co-working and body doubling and, you know, all the stuff. So it's a real mix in case that's of any use.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Adele. Is there anything you'd like to share with us just before you leave? Anything that's just top of mind that you just really want to speak?
I just don't think there's no solution. Like that is something that is very frustrating for an ADHD and when you just kind of go, well, there's this, you've got the pill or you've got this medication. I firmly believe there are multiple options. You've just got to find the right person to work with around it or to get that knowledge. So, you know, I just want to reassure you that there's hope. There's so
Mm.
much that can be done.
Thank you so much. You're amazing.
Pleasure. Thank you for
Thanks
having
so
me.
much. Yeah, lots of love. Thank you so much for listening, my love. To reclaim your wild feminine power, magic, and flow is an act of sacred rebellion, and it's needed now more than ever. Share this episode with a sister, share on socials, leave a review, and support this podcast and movement to grow and deepen around the world. To discover, activate, and embody your sacred feminine leadership archetype, take the quiz now at charlottequanto.com/quiz to find if you're a mystic, muse, connector, or challenger to become the feminine leader you're born to be. And until next time, my love, be devoted to your body as guide, your cycle as oracle, and your sisterhood as allies.